What is going on, guys? Ben Brewster here. Welcome to the Command Around the Mound, Part 1. I'm here with Craig Stem, Turner Givens, two of our performance coaches here at Tread. And we're going to be diving into command training today. We're going to be diving into common mistakes, looking through the biomechanics and the contributing factors from a mechanical standpoint when it comes to command issues, the mental side, common mistakes, kind of where to start if you're having command issues, and really just diving into specific case studies as well of pro, high school, and college guys that we worked with who kind of really started with kind of shaky command and what we've done in those individual scenarios to get them to where they are now. So let's just dive in. My first question for you guys would be, why is command training kind of such a difficult topic to unpack? Why is it kind of controversial? Why is it not something that we hear as much about as the velocity training and the other aspects that go into player development?
I think command is just pretty hard to quantify, especially when the environment that you're pitching in is constantly changing. Like, you see a lot of guys that can throw strikes in bullpens, so they don't necessarily think they need to work on command all that much. Then they get into a game, a little adrenaline comes in, timing changes a little bit. Now they're all over the place, so now they're thinking they need to work on their command, but then they go back to the pen and they're kind of throwing strikes again. And there's just so many factors that go into it. That's just one example that I think with it not being able to be quantified as easily as we can quantify velocity with a radar gun, it makes it a little bit more difficult to work on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's also kind of down the list of importance as well. Like you talked about with velocity, we know that higher velocity will bail you out in certain situations, but not a lot of people look at command the same way. So I know that's a new school approach. The biggest thing on the table right now is, can you throw as hard as possible and see if command kind of follows you, instead of maybe training the command aspect while you trust the process to build velocity.
And that's something else I want to get into in a minute here is, how do we actually combine those two factors? Because it seems like it's, binary. It's like we're only going to focus on velocity. That's the entire goal for the entire offseason, or we're only going to focus on command or pitch design. How do we blend those two things together? My take here on like why it's such a complex thing is, like you said, there's so many variables that go into the equation. There's the mental side, there's an emotional kind of psychological side. There's obviously the biomechanical side, there's an anatomical side and considerations there as well. And so there's all these overlapping factors that go into, can you throw strikes? And maybe, inning number one, you're throwing strikes, something happens, and now all of a sudden you lose it. And so did your mechanics change? Is it something about the environment? Is it a mental thing? Attentional issues, vision, there's all sorts of factors that go into it that really kind of muddy the waters when it comes to, not just quantifying it, which it's getting easier to quantify it with a lot of the advanced metrics and technology now, but how do you train it? How do you know kind of which avenue to take with a certain guy when he's having command issues? So maybe that's something we can go to next is, when you have a guy, first off, like, what are the metrics you're looking at to establish, is this a guy who has command issues? What are some of the favorite metrics that you guys will initially use when you're evaluating a player, and kind of going through some of the pros and cons of each of those?
Yeah, obviously we're going to look at the walks per nine is probably the number one. But that doesn't always tell the whole story. Sometimes guys with few walks still have command issues. When you see guys giving up a ton of hits, typically means they're throwing a whole lot of fastballs. If they're throwing a whole lot of fastballs, it's probably because they can't land a breaking ball for a strike. So, that's something that I always look at whenever a guy first signs up. Go look at their traditional stats, see if there's any red flags there, and then talk to them. Like, what do you think your biggest problem is? And if there's, almost everybody says they want to command the ball a little bit better. And part of that is true, and part of that comes from college coaches, high school coaches especially, really harping on it. But the stats, otherwise, I don't know if you want to get into more like advanced metrics, but
You can touch on a couple if you have a couple that you tend to look at.
well, there's just so many. There's so many, like extension numbers and just release points and where everything is. Compared to their mechanics. There's just so many different things that you can look at, but mostly for me it's mostly around like kind of that release point.
So you're also going in deeper. If you see that initial walks per nine or walk percentage a little bit elevated, now you're going into the mechanical side of things. Is that release point varying excessively pitch to pitch?
Yeah.
Is there anything else going on biomechanically
Where
that you
do they
can
stand
spot
on the
in the data?
rubber, things like that.
Gotcha. Turner, I'm curious at your take. Are you looking at in zone rates? Are you looking at first pitch strike percentage? Competitive location percentage, like what are kind of some additional metrics people can use as a general gauge for?
I eventually get to that point of release point, extension, pitch movement as well. Are there fluctuations with the fastball metrics or anything else, but I will go in and see, okay, let's look at the service level numbers. What is the walk percentage? What's walk per nine? And then go into in zone rate, first pitch strike percentage, our metric that we have in our internal database, which is over the plate percentage. I like using that to see, are they spraying or are they keeping it relatively competitive? And then also understanding the progression or regression of the level they're at will kind of help you understand what's going on. We know that the more advanced you get, the better the hitters are going to be, especially when you get towards the top end levels when ABS is involved. That's where things can kind of exploit command a little bit. But then when you go to lower levels, you have to understand the types of hitters you're facing, the umpires you're going to have behind the dish. There's so many different factors, official scores, the defense you have behind you, all that matters in certain situations. So it just depends on the level as well.
So a lot of these like surface level metrics are really just kind of a proxy for like, can you get the ball in the zone?
Mm-hmm.
As a whole, obviously you can then go through individual pitches and be like, okay, maybe he's in zone 70% with the fastball, but 10% with XYZ other pitch. So kind of you can break it down from there too. If a guy's overusing his fastball because he doesn't have confidence in his other pitches, maybe you can see, oh, this new changeup we've been working on, his competitive location percentage, right, 50%. He's just like total waste pitches half the time with this other pitch. Okay, that's probably contributing. So you can kind of dig a little bit deeper, go through it on a pitch by pitch basis to try to figure out where some of these command issues are stemming from. Is it just like a global issue across his entire arsenal, or is it actually happening on like a pitch by pitch basis? One thing I'm curious your guys' take on, like, I think in zone rate can make some sense, but certain pitches, especially like a breaking ball where they primarily use it as a whiff pitch, or it's a pitch they're using later in the count. Like Will Vest, one of my guys, like 17% in zone rate on his changeup, but he's commanding it perfectly where he wants it. That's a put away pitch for him. So you're never going to see a 60% in zone rate with a pitch like that. That doesn't mean he's not commanding the ball where he wants on that specific pitch.
Yeah, I think like you said, with looking at, if let's say walks per nine is not super high or walk rate is not super high, but the hits per nine is up, going into it and figuring out, okay, they can command their fastball in zone, but that's the only thing they can throw in zone competitively. So hitters are able to bucket their ABs and take away something from your arsenal. If they know, good hitters, if they know you're only going to be able to throw the fastball in zone, they can take everything else away and just focus on just like sitting dead red on that. So I think hits per nine can also tell you, like, to go in deeper and find what else they're commanding, like pitch by pitch.
You can also look at have you ever look at the metric of like the race to 2 strikes?
Yep.
That's a
That's
big
a
one
huge
for
one.
me too. Like
Can you define that for people that aren't familiar with race to 2 strikes?
getting to 2 strikes before you get to 2 balls.
Yep. The percentage of the time that you get to 2 strikes before 2 balls.
And whenever somebody signs up and says, hey, I want to get more strikeouts, like that's one of the first metrics I look at is like the race to 2 strikes. If you're always getting to 2-0 or 2-1 before you're getting to 2-2, you got basically one chance to get that guy out before it's a full count to really go for the punchy, and then you have to throw something in the zone or near, try to get the chase. But I think that metric on its own speaks volumes to not necessarily command but control. Can you throw 2 pitches in the strike zone early in the count, and then you can actually control the AB from there.
Yeah, something that everyone already knows and gets harped on by every coach at every level, the first pitch strike percentage. But I just see that as such a correlator to performance, because now you have the ability to open up. Once you get ahead, you can open up every other pitch in your arsenal. You can start going for whiffs. You can start working to be a strikeout pitcher, but only if you get ahead, only if you get strike one. So you need a couple offerings that you can use to get strike one. If you only have that fastball, everything else is a whiff pitch that you're throwing below the zone, way out of the zone. Like it's very difficult to operate that way. So how do you guys think through, giving like the idea of like a bridge pitch or giving them something else they can work with to be able to land strike one?
I'm a huge fan of, like, if somebody has command issues with their four seam, and they don't already have a sinker or a cutter, trying to kind of figure out, like, try the sinker and the cutter to see if that just gets you in the zone. And you see it a lot, like guys that throw sinkers and they're always missing arm side with it, and they've never tried a cutter in their life. Like, here's a cutter, and then now that thing is just right down the middle, like with no cues, no nothing. Like, here, just grip it and rip it, and it's right down the middle. And that bridge pitch, I've coached a lot of guys to, hey, throw that anytime you're behind in the count, because it's always a strike. And then we can continue to develop these other pitches and try to learn to paint them. But that pitch right there is just keeping you in the count every time.
And that goes against like this kind of newer, like kind of conventional wisdom of, just only throw the pitches that are your best stuff more of the time. It's like, I can't throw my four seam unless it's 18 vert. I can't throw the sinker because it's, it's not like this filthy, 0 vert sinker. I can't throw that cutter because it's not like an outlier pitch. But really, it still has a lot of utility in an arsenal to have a couple different offerings, even if as a standalone pitch, that's not your best pitch. It still has utility to be able to give something that looks a little bit different than your fastball and have something else you can go to that you can consistently command at any count. So, like, for example, like guys who, they go to a certain org and they're breaking ball, like their, let's say, gyro slider or their cutter, taken away, they're given a sweeper. Oh, the sweeper grade's better. It's like, yeah, but he can't throw his sweeper for strike one. Like, why not keep the cutter or keep the gyro slider, something you can get in zone when you need to, and add a sweeper on top of that instead of scrapping it, just because it grades higher. Yeah. So there's a little bit of like conflating. This isn't like an outlier stuff pitch. There's room to have other pitches in the arsenal is my point.
Absolutely.
Just because now you have different looks on, hey, you can think of like the cutter as like, and the sinker, now you have 3 different fastballs, four seam, sinker, cutter, even though in isolation, neither of those might be an outlier pitch.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's also something to be said on the mental side of being able to throw that bridge pitch, knowing it's something that you're trying to get contact with. So with a cutter, like we're not necessarily going for whiffs. You're trying to just create poor contact, and that's got to be in zone. So I think guys have that the mental side is now kind of feeding into their ability just to kind of give up contact, knowing that that's kind of the goal of that pitch is to either get ahead or allow a guy to swing. We're not going for a whiff, especially if we're trying to bridge large arsenals, together from either a sinker sweeper or a big four seam and a big breaking ball.
Yeah, you got a filthy sweeper. You got the first time you throw it, you have a very good chance at getting a whiff. So if you can make that happen the first time with 2 strikes, that bridge pitch helps you get there so easily.
How do you guys think through the difference between control and command for people who haven't, kind of used them synonymously? Like, how would you define the, command versus control?
So I define control as like you see a 9 pocket down there. Like, can you throw the ball in that whenever you want, anywhere? Like, just throw a strike whenever you want to. Versus command, like, can I hit that square? Can I hit that square? Getting very just fine versus a strike. That's how I define it. Anyways.
Yeah, the intentions behind it. I think for some guys, you look at the really electric arms that you just need to have control, versus the guys that maybe don't have that the top end velo and they need to be a little bit more command focused, but the intentions will change behind that. Am I just trying to get it over the white of the plate, or am I trying to hit a specific spot?
How do you place the priority in terms of, hey, is the goal with this guy going into the offseason, like we're trying to improve his velo, improve his stuff, give him a couple more pitches, and just be in the zone? Or at what point do you start working on hitting very specific spots? Or does that come later in the progression once you can establish, all right, let's just get you in the zone first with 3 to 5 nasty pitches, get your velo where it needs to be for the level you're trying to play. Like, let's get that first and then worry about pinpoint. Or do you go just like, let's get in the zone, then let's split the plate in halves, like top half, bottom half, in or out? How do we know when we actually make that jump and progress to really trying to be pinpoint with, or do we even need to get to that point with every guy?
You don't have to get there with every guy. Guys who have really, really good stuff and throw really, really hard, they don't have to have pinpoint command. Of course, if that is reachable for them, and it's something that you always want to try to train a little bit, but it's never going to be priority number 1. Because like if you got a guy throwing 105 miles an hour with a 90 mile an hour wipeout slider, all he has to do is put it somewhere around the plate, or you can get very specific with their zones. Like, is your stuff playing at the top of the zone? And it's just like, don't worry about in, out, just make sure you can get it up. So like very specific areas. But the worse your stuff, the better your command has to be. So it's a tough game to play sometimes, kind of a balancing act of like, okay, this guy's stuff isn't great, so he needs great command, but he also needs better stuff.
Right.
So like from
where do you place priority in the off season? Like, how do you, okay, this guy kind of just like, let's say he just sucks all around. Command's not good, velo's not good. It's like, well, what do we do? Like, how would you lay that out, and what would you prioritize first?
Yeah. I think for me, I typically have a pretty good idea of a guy's potential. Like if I have a little lefty that's throwing 92, 93, and he's 6 foot tall, 185 pounds. Like, I'm not going to beat my head against the wall trying to get this guy to throw 96, 97, because it's probably, even if we're able to kind of like have him do a max velo pitch and hit that kind of velo, he just can't successfully pitch at that and sustain it over the course of a season. So that's a guy where I will probably prioritize stuff, like the off-speed stuff, the movement, and then commanding it, you know, with that type of movement.
I think looking at their role as well on their specific team or within their org, like with a starter, they're going to be going through the lineup a little bit more often. So maybe focusing on command versus just, you know, pure output versus a bullpen guy, depending on the level, they can get away with just pure stuff being more on the control side of things.
I think it's individual specific, because some guys, when they worry too much about hitting a precise location, their stuff plays down. Like, I'm thinking back to, you know, Kyle Wright is a good example here, where he was throwing his curveball 82, 83, maybe only using it 15, 20% of the time. It's like, hey, by the way, your curveball is your best pitch, but it's better when you throw it 85, a little bit tighter, and don't worry about being so pinpoint. He threw more strikes to the pitch. It played up 2 miles an hour, and he started using it 30% of the time because he realized that that was actually a weapon for him. And so I think there are some guys, in my experience at least, that can have success kind of either way, but their stuff plays up. And so it kind of outweighs the downsides of, okay, that miss distance, the average miss distance is going to be a little bit higher, but now it's plus 3 miles an hour. And so you kind of have to weigh what type of guy this is. If you just give them like bottom half of the zone as hard as you can, 85 with a breaking ball, like nasty breaking ball, versus like, I want you hitting this precise spot, and they can do it, but it's 82. And you kind of have to like figure out where is that trade-off for a certain guy.
I've noticed it with guys specifically on non-fastballs, of whether it's changeup, splitter, or breaking ball. They're almost better off throwing it as hard as they can through the catcher versus trying to shape it, because then you see guys start to baby things, they start to miss arm side, they miss low. I think it just gives them a better feel for that pitch. They can almost use the catcher as like gauging the distance and just try to break it through them. I think when guys try to guide the pitch, yeah, it might break more, it might be a bigger pitch, but I just feel like it adds almost like a little bit of softness, or it brings the intensity down to where it's not, you know, sustainable over time.
Yeah, I think in my head, when I'm throwing a breaking ball, priority number one is make it nasty, right? And then the secondary priority is like maybe nasty, like a little bit over here, rather than trying to be so pinpoint. Because if you're trying to put it in that exact spot, exactly like you said, you end up throwing a crappy breaking ball. And even if you hit the spot, it's a lot more hittable than if you just ripped it.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things where you have to be able to kind of balance both things in your mind. Like, if it's just like throw strikes above all else, you have a bunch of little leaguers throwing linear dart throwing patterns, like the still head, like fielding position. It's like, yeah, but you throw 50 miles an hour. Like, you can't play the next level with certain patterns. You just like, but they might lend itself to throwing more strikes like today as like kind of a crutch, but it's not going to work long term. You have to be able to actually rotate violently, throw hard enough to play at the next level, and then also have a certain requisite threshold of command. But you guys are familiar with the Clayton Kershaw, classic Clayton Kershaw video where he's explaining his thought process, and we'll put it up in the video here for people to watch. But basically, he's like talking about how does he balance like where he's trying to throw the pitch and then how hard he's trying to throw the pitch. And I think the way he described it is so like, it's so perfect. Basically, he's like, in the back of my mind, I know where I'm trying to throw that pitch, but then 90%, like majority of my intent and my focus is on just throwing it as hard as I possibly can with conviction. It's not like the inverse. It's not 90% of his bandwidth is on exactly where to throw the pitch, and then his body forgets to throw it hard. It's like, no, I kind of know where I'm throwing it. Everything else is just conviction. And so it's finding what is that like ideal blend for you. Is it like 50-50 location intensity? Can you just like cruise, just like not having to worry about throwing it hard, and it still comes out 94 in your case, right? Or do you need to be like the guy who's like, hey, it's 97 every pitch, but I still have that idea of where I'm throwing it? And for him, he's like, when I try to throw too precise, be too perfect, it doesn't go there. When it's like, I'm not trying too hard, it's just back in my mind where I'm throwing it. Conviction, that's the sweet spot that I was able to relate to a ton in my own career.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I went down that road. I mean, my command was never very good in my career, but it was mostly, I know what direction I'm going to, and I know what focal point I'm going to have for releasing this pitch, but it's let me rip it as hard as I can kind of through that general area. and it helped me out versus trying to kind of baby things. But again, I was a 1 inning guy, so the effort level could be higher, but I needed that kind of like you said, 10-15% in the back of my head of knowing, kind of just getting my direction towards the target and having a focal point that I know I could throw every pitch at, and it would end up in a general location of where I wanted it to go.
How do you guys think through this idea of command and velocity, and they're like inherently at odds, and people think, well, you can't worry about velo, it's going to just inherently make your command worse. Like they're just like inherently at odds. Is there a perfect world where you can both train to improve command and train to improve velo, and they're not necessarily competing with each other?
Right. I think I've always thought about it this way, but like the mechanics that allow you to throw harder often improve your command, especially for maybe like a fascial driven guy where you're just trying to get things to get pulled through. If you're just consistently getting to the exact same release point, your misses are going to be pretty small. And for a lot of guys, that the max effort fastball is not a pitch that they're trying to like pinpoint, but for a lot of my max effort guys, I mean, they throw a lot of pitches like right down the middle and inside, and like inner third, outer third, just strikes when they just try to throw really, really hard. And then kind of like to your point with the whole Kershaw thing, if they try to paint, that's when they start yanking. That's because they start forgetting about their tempo, and it messes with their timing, and then nothing feels good at release. But that's the biggest point I try to make to people. You don't have to pick one to train. Like you should be training both at the exact same time.
Why do you think that like stereotype exists though? It doesn't exist for no reason. Like obviously there are plenty of guys who go and do a velo program and then they go back to their school or whatever, and the coach is like, why are you trying to throw everything max effort? They're spraying balls. Like obviously it does happen. Why, like what are they doing wrong in those scenarios? What are those players doing wrong?
That's a tough question. I just feel like maybe they just don't know how to blend it. Maybe that's the place to start, is they understand how I can train command or how I can work on that and how I can work on velocity, but how do I blend those two things together so that they go well in the off season? And I know that it's gonna transfer over to the season, because I think that a lot of coaches also approach it that way, where they have to separate those two versus kind of blend them together. So maybe it's just not knowing how to go about it versus actually attempting it.
I think that's perfectly said. If you just spend these 3 months working on velo and you're just doing pull downs into a net, and now you're gonna totally just shift gears and now do these 6 weeks leading up to the season working on command, but there was never like a blending phase of how do I keep that intensity, the velocity I gain, blend it to the mound, and actually make sure that now I can compete in zone at these newer thresholds, these newer intensities, with these new patterns, more efficient patterns. I think the blending is a lot of times where that gets lost in translation. What would you guys say are like common mistakes or issues in that blending process? Like where does that get lost? If a guy's like, okay, I'm going to do pull downs, I'm going to do mound velo stuff into a net, and then I'm just going to I want to be ready for the season 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later. What gets lost in translation in that process where guys gain all this velo and then they're just spraying balls?
I feel like sometimes when you throw into a net, I often say you're either working over the rubber or over the plate on any given day. If you are simply focused on a speed stimulus with, overload, underload balls, chucking them hard as you can into a net, plyos, whatever it is. If you're just throwing into a net with no regard for where the ball is going at all, you're really just focused on how you're moving, right? That's the only thing that you're focused on. So that's over the rubber. You're just focused on how everything feels right here. And when you have a catcher or a 9-pocket and you're throwing 60 feet, you are worried about where the ball goes a little bit more. Now, even if it is a velo pin to a catcher, that scenario, you're actually kind of working on both. And you often see guys throw way harder to a net than to a catcher, just because the risk of, throwing it halfway up the backstop or spiking it 10 feet in front of the catcher and blowing him up is not in the back of their mind. So a mistake in not blending those is, you're really far away from the mechanics you can use in a game when you're just chucking into a net. And you have to at some point, get that. We call it, we talk about ecological dynamics here in the past. You have to actually see how far you have to throw the ball and then be able to throw it really hard too. So
for people that don't know that term, it's basically just like the science of the transfer of training. It's like, how does what we do transfer to a game setting, and really comes down to specificity. At the end, if you were to simplify it, it's like, how do we make our training more game-like?
Right.
And throwing into a net is extremely far from being game-like, but it still can serve a purpose. But you need a way to bridge that to the game because you're dealing with so many more variables, environmental variables in a game setting. You have a hitter, obviously, you have a catcher calling pitches, you have the fans, the crowd, distance behind the catcher, you have the game situation, the runner on second base, your stretch, quick pitch, wind up, like cleats, dirt, like muddy, like dugout in front of the rubber. There's all these variables that are so different that people just don't account for. They just don't appreciate in a training setting. It's like, oh, I'm just going to throw like nice easy bullpen at 75% and then hope this just transfers to like a pressure situation in a game, and then it all falls apart. And they're like, I don't know what happened. It's like, well, you had no plan for blending your pull downs in December to the game in February. Like there was just no sequential plan to get to that point where you can replicate this intensity, these patterns, this timing under pressure in those different game situations.
Yeah, I think you have to have a task and a target to be able to blend that. So if my task is, like, let's say we're doing pull downs to start to build velocity, but we also want to make sure that command is still in our back pocket. Our task is to throw as hard as we can, whether it's out of a shuffle or some type of constraint, but we have a target that we're throwing to. We're not just ripping into a net. So we have either a partner we're throwing to, or we have some type of target into a net that we know we're going through. Or on the mound, same type of thing is like we're throwing out of drills or we're throwing high effort, but we need to have a target, and the net is usually, a net 10 to 15 feet away from you is not a target that's going to help you with that.
Yeah, for me personally, I always prefer doing velocity work with a catcher. Even if it's like the start of a velo phase, it's still like, no, we're doing mound velo to a catcher. Now, there might be a specific time and a place where it's like a guy really has a hard time bridging that. So one of my pro guys, like, we'll still throw a first 3 to 5 pitches into a net, find his like threshold for the day. It's like, cool, we have 96 in us. Let's now be 96 with the catcher. Take the net away after 3 pitches just to see what your threshold is. Okay, it's 91, 92, but 2 weeks later, now 96 into a net, 96 to the catcher. And so you're able to kind of bridge that gap. But it's just such an easier transition if you've been doing your velo work to a catcher as you hop into a command phase, or maybe one of those bullpens a week is a velo day. The other is a kind of pitch design command day with some simulated hitters. It's so much easier to bridge the gap. You're not like waking up in January like, I forget how to actually do this. I've just been ripping into a net all off season. I'm throwing harder, but like I have no idea how to pitch. You don't get so far away from the actual sports specific skill. Let's talk real quick about your story, Craig, because for people who aren't familiar, you had the yips at one point.
Oh yeah.
You don't anymore. You haven't for quite some time. And not only that, you have, 5 pitches now? 5 pitches. You can throw them in any count. Your walk rate's been under 3 the past handful of years. Even though you're technically retired, you're still actively pitching for local professional teams. So talk about that transformation, because a lot of people think, oh, you have this guy's back command, he's kind of always going to have back command. Or you get the yips, like you're doomed. It's not the case. Like we've had plenty of players that have terrible command who improved it, and you're kind of exhibit A. So take us real quick through like how did that start, and then what were the 2 or 3 keys that kind of got you out of that hole to where you are now with, relatively elite command. Like you could go get AAA hitters out today in the mid 90s with 5 pitches.
Yeah.
At what, 35 years old?
30. Yeah, about to be 36.
About to be 36. So take us through that story real quick. Like
Yeah. So long story short on the yips, I developed the yips because when I was a young pitcher, high school, I always threw hard, always had a great breaking ball, had a lot of success in high school. Not a lot of guys could hit me, but my senior year I had 55 innings, 115 strikeouts, and like 52 walks. So I was either striking them out or walking them. And as you can imagine, every single coach I ever had my entire life was, man, you'll be really something special if you can learn how to throw strikes and cut down on the walks. So that was harped on me always. When I went to college, there was a pen where I basically had a pitching coach freak out on me and tell me that this was all in my head. And I believed him. And that basically parlayed into getting the yips. And basically I got obsessed with trying to figure out how to command the ball a little bit. So that's when I started to really dive in on the mechanics and everything. First step for me was getting a little bit of control, finding some cues and stuff that helped me throw the ball in the zone. And I'd say I got to AAA with like really bad command, but I had decent enough control. I could throw the ball to thirds of the plate and get kind of close, and I also could just throw a strike when I wanted to. But the pinpoint command did not come. We had this conversation the other day about like when I learned a sinker. We talked a little bit earlier about, you know, having that bridge pitch kind of keeps you in there. I had a crappy four seam, and it would not work unless I painted. But it was so hittable that I really felt like I needed to throw strike one to get ahead in the count, because if it's 2-0 and I have to throw it over the plate, it's really going to get crushed. So when I learned the sinker, that's when I started to get really good command, because now I had a pitch that I had confidence I could throw in the zone and get an out, that then I could practice actually painting that first pitch. If I missed a little bit off the plate and I fell behind 1-0, 2-0, I knew then, you know, how to get it back. And also just throwing two different types of fastballs that move differently. I started to kind of put pieces together in my head about, you know, where does my pelvis need to get open to? Because I think about it a little bit more mechanical than I think a lot of guys do. But through those years, transitioning to a starter also helped. I should add that. Transitioning to a starter, it became a lot more important because I was one of those stuff guys that didn't necessarily need to command it when I was in the pen. But as a starter, you know, you gotta command it. You gotta move it in and out. You gotta change eye levels and do all these things. And for me, it was a very big mechanical focus. Like I said, my biggest one is figuring out how to rotate to the spot I want the ball to go to. And over the years, I do a lot of command work with a 9 pocket. I'm really big on that. Like if I want a guy to do command work, I will have them throw to a 9 pocket rather than a catcher. And my thought there is just that a catcher moves around too much. You know, there's too many variables. Every catcher sets them in a different spot. Every catcher has their glove in a different spot. Every catcher receives the ball differently, giving you different feedback. So when you're in an off-season in a training environment, I love throwing to a 9 pockets because that thing does not move. If I hit that pole 3 times in a row, I know I threw that ball to the exact same spot.
And you'll use that as kind of an initial kind of training wheels,
Yes.
command training, before integrating the more game-specific stuff, getting back to adding the catcher, adding the hitter.
Of course.
Use that as like, because I know George Kirby's talked about like, that's something he does. It's kind of counterintuitive. Like, it's not game-like, it's not as specific, but it does kind of like take out some of the other layers where like, that's all you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, where are you throwing it? And then you can kind of like add in the additional variables to actually prepare for the pressure of a true game.
Right. So I basically would just use that kind of bullpen, like a 9 pocket. I want to work on my glove side. I might throw 20 sinkers in a row and try to hit the pole on my glove side. And through that type of pin, all I'm trying to do is find cues. Like, okay, I'm going to try to make that pole the middle. I'm going to drift over there. I'm going to make sure my pelvis and my torso get open over there. Make sure my timing is good. And every single time I throw it, depending on where I missed, if I'm pretty close to it, sick, another rep, try to hit it again. If I yank it, I'm not a robot. Sometimes I mess up. I'm still just going to try it again. If I yank it again, now I know something mechanical is going wrong. So I kind of use my head to be like, okay, so if I'm yanking it, that means my torso is ending up over here. So I'll cue myself something to get the torso back, which there's so many different cues you can use. But basically, in that type of bullpen, I will find cues that are just adjustments based on a miss. And then when you add the catcher back in, if you yank it, you just cue yourself that cue that you found that works, and it gets you right back.
And the idea is that you, through that type of bullpen, and what intensity would you say that type of command training bullpen is for you? Like, it's not max effort, obviously.
It's not max effort, but it's you know, picture like 90%. Like, you know, picture just like you know, you're just throwing BP to one of your buddies, and you want to get them good looks at not BP, but like a live AB.
Do you have a radar gun going there, or because the focus is on command, you don't want a radar board, you don't want a radar gun?
No,
I
always have a radar gun.
You always have it. Do you
Always
feel
have
like that's distracting for some guys? Like, would you keep that on for everybody to make sure they're above that certain threshold, or does that become a distraction for that type of bullpen?
There's a handful of guys that I'll turn it off for if they're like a real domer, you know, somebody that really gets in their head about things. Me personally, I'll have the radar gun on, and I don't care if I'm throwing 94. I just want to know how hard it is. Like if I'm nailing the spot and I'm throwing 85, I'm like, okay, that's not even close to my in-game speed, so I need to be a little bit more intense than that.
For me, it was always a little bit distracting. I don't know, depending on the guy, but like just seeing an LED board right there when I'm trying to focus on locating, it's like I start to try to like worry more about the velocity than actually where I'm executing. So for that type of bullpen, for me personally, I would turn off the LED board.
Right.
But I know some guys can, because there's like an emotional attachment to the number that you see. You're like, I think I throw 95, but that was 90. Like, I need to make this next one 93, and as opposed to that's not the point of this bullpen.
I'm a more experienced pitcher, of course. So like
Right.
I know that
Right.
I've got 95. Like I know that.
There's not like a emotional attachment to when you throw in and it's 89. You're not like,
Right.
shit, something's
I
wrong.
also am just kind of arrogant about it. Like I could probably pitch and get you out at 87, 89.
Right.
Like it's no problem. So.
Which is probably why that works for you and
Yeah.
other guys. They're like, their identity is tied up in how's my stuff, and it can really be a distraction. I know Zombro's had a bunch of guys where he's like, hey, we got to turn off the radar gun for these particular types of pens because it just serves as too much of a distraction for that type of guy.
Especially if you're a guy that doesn't train at a place like Tread where there is radar everywhere,
Right.
And you're not used to having it. That's something I see at a lot of guys, like when they come to Tread, because that LED board is there, now they're like, oh, velo, like just because it's there. I personally am used to training on radar guns all the time, so it doesn't, like, I have no emotional attachment to it, I don't guess.
Trying to get guys to understand that is just feedback.
It's
That's
just
all it
feedback.
is.
Yeah, you don't have to
might
throw
help with the
95,
mental
man.
side too. Like I'm not going to get domed up if I see the radar gun flashing a number I'm not happy with. It's literally just feedback and that's it. Same thing with a catcher with a 9 pocket. The guys don't get as frustrated if they miss the 9 pocket than if they have a velocity they're not happy with. So why is that? Yeah, why is that different? Why can't we just focus on like, okay, that's just feedback for me to make an adjustment?
And that's actually something I've noticed is totally different with how big leaguers approach their bullpens and how like hard throwing college guys approach their bullpens. Because like we'll have college guys in here throwing 95 all the time, but there's a reason they're not a big leaguer. And maybe some of them will be one day, but like you watch how a big leaguer approaches their preparation. There's that internal like criticism of like, okay, what is the goal of this rep and was that a successful rep or not? When they like spray a ball or bounce a breaking ball, or like they weren't intending to, like miss a spot by 2 feet, it's like they're like, you know, cursing under their breath. Like they're pissed about that. They're not pissed if it's like 88 to 90 in the bullpen. That's not their goal.
Right.
But it's the college guy, a lot more times than not, even if it's like a sub-max day, if the location's not where they want, but the velo is where they want, they're like, okay, good rep. So it's just like, what standard are you setting and what are you trying to reinforce in that bullpen? And the big leaguers are like so much more around the general area versus just like spray and pray. The only focus is on stuff, and it comes back to that Kershaw thing. Like the focus is just on throwing as hard as you can with zero awareness of where you're trying to throw. Okay, now you're 100 and 0. Your focus is split 100-0. There still has to be some level of balance between the two. I think that's where that like, that stereotype that velo training leads to that comes from, because guys go all the way to this side of the spectrum as opposed to finding that kind of sweet spot of I still have a focal point and I'm still holding myself accountable. It's not just about how hard it is. It's like how hard can it be within the strike zone. It's not a good rep if it's 95, but you spray it. It's just right. You have to hold yourself to a higher standard.
I've seen it with Dane Dunning when he gets in here and throws his pins, very command focused, but he'll find the feel for a pitch in a certain location and then try to push the velocity from there. So again, most of his frustration is when he misses a location, not when the velocity is not where he wants it to be. So it'll be, his pins, if we're 86 to 88 in his pins, he'll be dotting up at 86, trying to get feel for a specific pitch or specific location, and then he'll try to run it up to 88 in that same focus, just to kind of try to blend those two in one session.
Craig, I'm curious if we can kind of shift gears a little bit start talking a little more about the mental side. I want to talk about routines, but I'd like for you to kind of demonstrate, like, if you're setting up for a pitch, you're taking the sign, like, what is going through your mind? Like, as the catcher calls the pitches, as you come set, where's the focal point? Is there a breath? How do you, like, handle a reset? Like, just literally take us through, like, what is going through your mind as you go through that entire, like, 20 seconds or 15 seconds before getting the sign through the release of that pitch.
Yeah, so for me, a grip splitter. I come set, let's say I come set and my catcher gives me sinker away to my glove side. So immediately what comes into my head is extension. It's just basically just a bunch of cues that I have found in pins that I know get me to this spot.
So one or two thing, like one or two tiny mechanical feels that you've established over time work for you.
Yeah. So if I'm going glove side, let's say that's the pitch. I'm gonna come set, 2 things in my head. All right, get extension. So like that's the first thing is like that's the first thing I would think is like I got to make sure I get a lot of extension on this pitch. So for me, that's like get my hand as close to him as possible, and then from here to make sure I get the pitch over there. In my bullpens, the feel that I have found when I'm trying to hit the pole in the 9 pocket on my glove side is really focus on stepping like at a lefty, like really clear my pelvis, get it open, and then the sinker comes back, so it comes back over the plate. So that's typically, like in my head, I'm kind of like drawing the line of like, I got to get open over there and bring it back over here. And it'll be as simple as that for like the first sinker I throw, literally, okay, get good extension, get my pelvis open over there, boom. And then depending on what happens with that pitch, if I yank it a little bit, there's an adjustment for that. If I leave it arm side, there's an adjustment for that. And I found that in, you know, thousands of bullpens I've thrown over my career.
Gotcha. So in your case, it's a little bit more like you have a whole flow chart of things that have worked for you, and like that one thought or cue, depending on the certain pitch type.
Yeah, it starts very, very simple. Like I said, get extension, get your pelvis over there. Like for me, that's my cues for a glove side sinker. And then you have a whole bunch of adjustments. Like, you know, picture like you throw a bullpen one day where you're just working on getting to the glove side, and you find a cue that works. It's clear the pelvis, for example. Clear the pelvis, that cue works for you. Write it down. And then over the years, that list will become 10 cues long of things that you can try. And I think from the mental side of the game, just to bring it back to that, the worst place you can be on the mound as a pitcher is completely lost and have no feel for what is going on with no plan to get you back on track. So even if you're wrong, even if the cues that you have are just not going to work or they don't make any sense, I think mentally it gives you confidence because it's like it's a type of preparation, right? I feel prepared. I have an answer for every problem that is going to be thrown at me, so that for me, pitching becomes very matter of fact. It takes emotion out of it completely. It's not like, ooh, I missed that spot. It's like, ooh, I yanked it a little bit. That means my torso went a little bit early. I might not go like that deep into it, but I'll just be like, like that was. My torso went early, so let me just stay sideways longer. You know, just find a little cue that has worked. And it's not, on the mound, it's not like this big, like long thought process. It's literally like torso, stay sideways. You know, cue myself that way, throw the next one.
You're not necessarily like actively internally thinking about it. It's just a feel.
I've already figured it out.
You felt yourself to do that.
Yeah.
You know you need to do
It's
that.
not, you're not searching.
Not
I think
searching.
some people might think that it's searching, but it's giving you something to believe in. If you're searching, you're not fully bought into what you're trying to find, but you have that list of things you can go through.
Yeah.
You know, like it gives you confidence, like you said. So you're not searching necessarily.
To me, it's not a guess. I'm not guessing like I think this is going to work.
Yeah.
It's like I know this works because I've done it before, so I'm going to do it here. And then if it doesn't work, I go, what else can I try? You know, and it's just kind of like, and there's always confidence that it's going to work because it's worked before. So like if you're never training in that way, if you're never training, like I attempted to go glove side and I yanked it, and you don't even try to make the adjustment, like the next week you're just like, let me just try it again, and you hit it, and you're like, oh, I'm good. Like, well, did you actually like actively make an adjustment and like figure out something that you can go to in a game, or are you just up there ripping? And I mean, some people pitch that way and it's fine.
Having the intention to make an adjustment, I think, is underrated. That guys don't.
Absolutely.
They feel like, I don't even know how to describe it, but I feel like guys don't try to make that adjustment in their pins. They just hope that it'll happen.
Right.
And they won't find the answer for themselves long term.
And I think that's a major shift I made in my own career. Like me 10 years ago, if I went out there and the first two batters hit missiles and get on and I'm missing spots and my slider's not working, I'm out there like, oh my God, please pop out, please swing and miss, please hit it, please hit a missile.
There's no
at
actual
somebody.
change to the approach.
Yeah.
You're hoping that
I am hoping
something different happens.
And I'm feeling lost in my own head. And then now when I go pitch, it is very matter of fact, very like, well, that was a crappy slider. It looks a little gyro-y, maybe I'm under it. Let me just get my fingers up and rip this next one. And literally every pitch has that kind of thought process behind it a little bit. And like I said, it's quick. It's just like I get the ball back and I literally just go, get the pelvis open and then throw the next pitch.
Right. I do think that in your case, you have thousands of innings in your career under your belt, and you're describing a level of kind of mastery of your delivery and your mechanics and what works for you that a lot of guys watching this don't have yet. Maybe a kid in high school, or even, I mean, myself in college, like I never got fully past that. Like I was just working on my mechanics, my stuff, and just generally being in the zone and keeping it super simple. How would we regress this for somebody who like they haven't figured out the initial cue for each pitch type and then the second cue and adjustment they need to make if each of those pitch types isn't working? Because that's a lot of processing and thinking for somebody who hasn't just been throwing command bullpens with awareness and like kind of logging those adjustments over 15 years. Like where do we start? Where do we start with somebody who's like, I walk a batter per inning, I have no idea what's even going on. What are you talking about? Mental game process, like pre-pitch routine? I don't even know what you're talking about. where do we begin with an athlete that's in that state that doesn't have the level of mastery that you're describing?
Yeah, I think to regress, you just start way simpler, right? You do the same exact thing that I said earlier, where you just put the 9 pocket there. You say, let me work on my glove side today. And you just throw over there all day. And it can be anything, glove side, top rail, bottom rail, arm side, whatever. And you don't start with, get the pelvis over there, because the guy who's walking a guy per inning has no feel for his mechanics. You know that, right? So you can't even go mechanical. So you start simple, like change your focus. Like if you're yanking everything, just take your eyes, move them over here, try that one. Just start something really simple. But I think it's really important to just find your cues. They can be super simple, they can be more complex. The longer you play, the more complex they'll get, in my case. But you start with the very, very simple ones. Change your eyes, change how fast you get down the mound. But it's the same thing. Find some cues that work.
It comes with awareness of what you're doing. So it's not just like ripping balls and catch play, and then I don't even know what I felt. I don't even care where that ball went. It's
Right.
like it's awareness of what you're trying to do. You're throwing it to like maybe you're not throwing it to a precise spot, but you're throwing it to a general area, or you're working on something mechanical. But there's an awareness of everything that you're doing, and if you have an awareness, then you have an awareness and an intent behind each throw in catch play, each pitch in a bullpen setting or in a game. Now you can kind of figure out what went wrong, and over time you start to develop much better feel for your mechanics. If you never have any intent or any awareness of what you're doing and you're just going through the motions, you never start to learn those things about your delivery. Like the pro guys that we coach, like they know their own delivery better than anybody else. They're a master of their own delivery because they practice with intent and focus behind everything.
Yeah, I think if you lack the awareness, starting with something external, like an external focus, like you said, a focal point of if I'm missing low, I just need to try to airmail this through the top of the catcher's head. What adjustment is that going to force you to make with the body without even thinking? Versus the opposite, if I'm sailing everything and I need to try to pepper ball on the zone, I'm going to try to spike it and see if that gets my timing or my mechanics to adjust without me having to think about specific cues. Which I think that is probably best for guys that don't have 1,000 career innings, guys that need to be a little bit more external and find what works there before they dive into the internal side of things, finding some feels or mechanical changes and cues that they can make, mid-pitch.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I've had success with just kind of split testing different spots on the rubber. Like if a guy is standing on the first base side and because he always misses arm side, for example, put him over here and see if him stepping this way actually gets him open and actually gets him in the zone a little bit more. Literally just throw 5 here, throw 5 here, throw 5 here, see which ones are actually kind of down the middle. And be like, maybe that's where you need to stand,
And that's something super simple that
Right.
we'll get into the biomechanical stuff in a little bit, but like that is something that anybody can go and split test right away. Just like you might do that from a velocity split test standpoint too.
Right,
but
right.
again, like quick things that you can try just to see if that has an immediate impact. What do you guys think is the biggest like misconception players have about the mental game? Because I know I've struggled with like getting buy-in from players, or it's just like not super sexy. Like I remember in college, like I was introduced by great pitching coach my freshman year to the mental game. And I bought in. I was like, I need this. I can't throw strikes. Like, I need this. And it helped a ton. But I saw most other guys just didn't really. They were like, roll their eyes. Like, why is that? Like, what are the misconceptions? What are the reasons like you don't see the mental game really being taken seriously at most levels?
I think you see so many different types of mentalities in the big leagues that can work. You have the Kyle Hendricks whose face never changes, and you have Max Scherzer who's crazy intense. And a lot of guys that I have talked to kind of see a guy and they like the way they pitch. Like maybe like me, I'm kind of a more laid back, chill guy. And I've gone through phases in my career where I tried to like be Max Scherzer, and that's like not me. Seeing a mentality that works. You see all these guys in college, these days like getting really fired up and like being absolute dogs, and maybe that works for them. But if you're not that guy, don't try to be that guy. You got to find kind of the best alter ego version of you that is still kind of you.
Which takes some experimentation to find that like mental state where you pitch your best. For me, I pitch best when I am in that hyper aggressive state. Will Vest, that was one of the key adjustments a couple of years ago that, again, we were just trying to work on getting his stuff consistently be at his best, but he threw more strikes when he was in that mentality too. But like that's not my off the field personality. I'm super chill, but on the field I found that like I had to kind of like fake it, so to speak, like become that alter ego that was a little bit different. But like some guys just need to be themselves out there, and they way better when that like on-field, off-field persona kind of match.
Yeah.
I think some guys think that working on the mental game is soft. I mean, this is obviously, like, we know baseball is a pretty ego-fueled sport, and if I work on the mental game, like, that's just,
That
that's kind of
means I'm
soft.
mentally
Yeah,
weak.
that means I'm weak.
Well,
Instead
yeah,
of
I
like,
mean,
if
yeah.
I can work on velocity like that, I mean, like, I'm that guy. So I don't think guys really reel it back and try to figure out, what is going on the mental side. And I know that, I have an example of that with Troy Watson of, yeah, I am aggressive, but what am I aggressive about? So, oh yeah, my mental side is dialed in. I'm super aggressive, but is that taking you away from what actually matters, which is getting outs?
Let's go through kind of like what is the most important place to start for when you're trying to get into learning the mental game? Like, obviously, like, if I was going to distill it personally down to like that big overarching goal, would be learn to play one pitch at a time. Like, be present, be able to take the game in these one pitch chunks. But how do we do that? Do we start with like routine? Do we start with just like learning how to have like a basic process out there on the rubber? Our reset routine, our like flush routine when something goes wrong, like, where do we start from? Like, if guys are going to dip their toes into the mental game to try to improve their command, what's like the first place they would go?
I think first things first, you need to figure out your optimal level of arousal, right? Like, we have a test, a mental skills test that guys can go through that'll kind of tell you, should you be this more calm, stoic kind of pitcher that's playing the chess match, or should you be the guy who's trying to run through the wall? I think you start there, and then you practice kind of getting there in your mind, whatever it is. Maybe it's Happy Gilmore's Happy Place or something like that. But kind of figuring out like where that is, and then work on getting there. I think that's where you start, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think from there, you can take it into challenging the environment and testing yourself with different stress levels to see if you can adapt in time, and what types of situations do you not perform very well at. So you can kind of take it into your training and focus on challenging the stress of the training, not the physical stress, the mental stress of the training, whether that's always having a guy stand in the box when you're throwing a pin, or you can only throw a certain amount of fastballs in live ABs, like challenging what you're trying to do on top of figuring out what type of pitcher am I, so that you can adapt. In any situation, I know that I can adapt to what's going on.
So developing the ability to adapt requires adding in variability or challenges in training, not just doing the exact same thing every time. I know that kind of gets into the bullpen levels idea, which overlaps with the mental stuff. But if you're just throwing, like, we call them level 3 bullpens, it's just like I'm on a mound throwing my pitches, calling my own pitches in sequence to a catcher, like how everyone throws bullpens. Like, I'm going to throw 10 fastballs, now I'm going to throw 10 changeups, now I'm going to throw 10 curveballs. Okay, bullpen's over. Like, that's a very low mental stress type of bullpen that, hey, it might transfer. You might be able to just go from that straight up into a high pressure situation and perform, but a lot of guys can't. And so how do we like add those pieces of variability or those pieces of like complexity as a guy prepares for the season?
I'm going to take a super detailed approach away from bullpens for the start. Is like, we want guys to have a pretty solid routine, but you almost want them to everyone has so many resources at their disposal. What if you get into a game and you weren't able to do a specific warm-up that you normally like to do? Is that going to dome you up? So being able to have a routine that works for you, but also understanding that nothing's going to be perfect. You're not always going to be able to get needled. You're not always going to have Mark Pro available. You're not going to have 20 minutes to warm up. So how can we challenge that initial side of things too? And then obviously, like, that might even transfer over naturally to the mound, knowing that, like, okay, I didn't have a perfect warm-up, but I know that I can go get outs, might change a guy's mindset just from the start.
Yeah, I've seen guys get wrecked because there's a rain delay.
Yeah.
It's like, that's so soft, right? And that's, I like what you said about kind of like adding variability or even just challenges to bullpens. Like, you see guys sometimes here, if, one pin ran 10 minutes late and a guy was loose and he's like, oh man, he's like so mad that the pins are running behind. And it's like, brother, this could absolutely happen to you in a game. What if you throw one pitch to the catcher and his thumb cramps? It's like, you're going to have to find a way to get locked in and look at things that happen in training that throw you off mentally as a great time to practice those skills.
Right. So, I mean, intentionally trying to throw guys off. I know you mentioned, like, some of your guys will throw on different mounds every single time in the facility. You're adjusted, like the catcher's not set up in the same spot. You're not throwing any 2 pitches, the same pitch back to back. Stand-in hitter, catcher calling pitches, simulated counts. We've done like heckle pens where other athletes are kind of heckling you and you're trying to distract you. different like visual distractions, but like any way to make the game more alive, where it's more there's more variability that you have to deal with. That's how you become more adaptable. And I'm thinking back to like there's a well-known Adam Wainwright clip where he's talking about this exact thing. It's like routines are great, but don't get married to that routine because there's going to be stuff that happens that throws you off that in game. So you need to be able to balance that as well. Like routines help set a lot of these things on autopilot, give you conviction, give you confidence, but you also need to just know like I've been training for this for however long you've been training as a pitcher, a decade, 2 decades, like I can do this even without that routine.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue into the Troy Watson situation from the last offseason. Obviously, guy who can throw the ball really hard, but the command has never really been there. I think like 5 to 6 walks per 9 every season. Going into this offseason, we definitely identified the mental side as being an issue where he was an aggressive pitcher, but he always felt like he had to strike guys out to have success or get promoted in the system instead of focusing on just pitch by pitch, focusing on that process. But in the offseason, instead of doing a normal, on-ramp and intensity on-ramp, which, is just like, we're just ripping pull downs or anything like that, I gave him a velocity threshold with a target and allowed him to use either infield throws, catcher pops, spinning throws, and even some full delivery stuff to build the intensity and catch play. And then from there, like you just mentioned, he was never allowed to throw on the same mound in the same week. So we were either going to be over here, we're going to be over there in one of the overflow lanes. We would change that aspect, and then on top of it, we would manipulate what the task was down at the target. So either the catcher would start short, go to normal distance, go deep so that he could just split the catcher in half and focus on one focal point. Or I had him play tic-tac-toe against Craig so that, I gave both of them velocity thresholds and almost made it competitive, but the focus was still almost more command oriented because we had to hit, for tic-tac-toe, you have to hit a spot to win the game. And then adding a little bit of velocity threshold allows them to keep the intensity slightly high, so it is almost game-like.
Can you talk through his specific situation where, he thought he had a strong mental game? How did you like uncover the actual issue through that process?
So surprisingly, he made it kind of easy. He like was straight up. He's like, I gotta figure out why my stuff is electric, but I'm just not having success. So diving into it, like asking him questions because I wanted him to bring it up versus me trying to. I didn't want to give him the answer where it could kind of get skewed a little bit. So just asking him like, what's your thought process on the mound? What is your goal with each pitch? And he never brought it back to, I'm trying to do this every single pitch. It was, I'm just trying to strike everyone out because I know I'm going to be the best pitcher possible and I'm going to get promoted. Like that's my top goal. I want to make the show. So it's always kind of, he was focused on the end result. You got to get the 2 strikes. We talked about this yesterday. You got to get the 2 strikes to have a chance to strike a guy out. Yeah. So why not worry about pitch to pitch, executing it perfectly, and then you'll eventually look up after 6 innings and you'll have 10 punchies and 1 walk versus, I might be able to strike guys out here and there, but I'm going to be so focused on punching guys out that now I'm kind of all over the place with what I need to do.
So basically you started to really leverage and incorporate variability into his training, and we focused on through talking to him and understanding what the actual issue was. He was focusing on the outcome, not the process, being pitch to pitch oriented, getting him back focused on one pitch at a time, adding variability into the training. That was a big unlock for him. I have an example with one of my guys, Daniel Blair, because he was a 5 to 6 walks per 9 guy through college. I think it was 3.3 walks per 9 last year. And for him, it was just simplifying it to that pre-pitch routine. And I got some of this from Alan Jaeger, who I love how simple he makes it as like a starting point for guys who are like, there's so much stuff here. Like, where do I start? He's like, look, this is what I tell guys. If you had to make the best pitch of your life right now, what are the 2 to 3 things you would tell yourself, or like the feels or the things you have to think to do that? And most guys, like if they really think about it, they kind of know what it feels like on their best pitch. He's like, if a guy doesn't have any idea, then like the most common things are breathe, focal point, attack. There needs to be something that gives you that reset before each pitch or after the previous pitch. The breath we haven't talked about the breath yet. We're running out of time because there's so much to cover, but like the breath is kind of that reset physiologically that helps you like flush the previous pitch, like control your breathing, control your heart rate. Focal point, we need to have some sort of target like we talked about. Is it soft focus? Is it fine focus? So some sort of focal point of where we're trying to throw the pitch, and then attack, something that gives us that conviction to attack with. And Kershaw example again, like he has a focal point in the back of his mind, And then most of it is on that attack. It's on that conviction of actually committing 100% to the pitch and just throwing it. If you have that, that now becomes your process. Like that is the only thing that matters in that situation where we're just making sure that we're able to throw the pitch, reset, commit to our process, commit to those 2 to 3 things. Throw the pitch, come set, commit to those 2 to 3 things. And if you do that, now you have something you can go to regardless of what's happening in the game situation. It's like that anchor amongst the chaos. All this crap that's happening over the course of the game, runners on base, you just gave up a home run, whatever, come back to your anchor. Your anchor is your process, and that's your pre-pitch routine. And so for Blair, it was simplifying his approach, giving him that, like, what is my pre-pitch process, ultra simple, giving him a little bit wider, softer focus. So, hey, he's blowing up the middle of the catcher with his best stuff. As he started to throw more strikes, as his walk rate started to drop, hey, now we're going to split the plate into halves. Now we're going to split the plate into thirds. But only after we made sure he could, continue to maintain his top velo and lower his walk rate. Now we can kind of progress it from there. And then kind of next podcast, we can go through some of the biomechanical factors. But for him, there were a couple of things that we needed to dial in, which were just absolutely throwing off making it a much tougher uphill battle for him, just because he had a few mechanical, timing, directional things that we needed to attack as well. So it kind of gets into, there's the mental side, but there's also the biomechanical side, and those things can kind of go hand in hand. Awesome. Well, there's a few audience questions here. We're not going to be able to get to all of them in this podcast, but let's just go through a couple kind of rapid fire and do our best to answer some of these. So when you're thinking about making adjustments in game, what are you doing to execute a put away pitch? Like what minor adjustments in your mechanics or minor adjustments in your focal point or your mentality are you using if you need to, get a 2-strike curveball below the zone or you need to elevate a fastball? Like what is actually happening in your mind to make that adjustment?
It really depends on your stuff. For me, my sweeper is very, very good. I have thrown enough sweepers in bullpens and stuff, glove side, off the plate, away, that for the most part, I'm really just thinking about making it super nasty. And then if there is a location that I need to hit, then I'll cue whatever cue I found in my bullpen prep to get me there. But being super aggressive and trying to make the pitch, a put away pitch for me, my priority is making the pitch really nasty over putting it in a specific spot.
Yeah, for me it would be, and this worked for me, but I definitely see it work for other guys, is just changing the focal point just a little bit and committing to it. I think that's the biggest thing. Is like if you're going to change the focal point, don't baby it to that location because it might just back up to the location that you originally had it. If you think about it, if we're making a small change with focal point, it's going to be a minimal change up here on the rubber. And I think too many guys will make a large change up here. And if you think about it, 60 feet, 6 inches away, that's going to turn into a large difference down towards the plate, even larger than the change you're making up at the top. So little focal point change, commit to that focal point change so that you keep the intensity high and see how it goes from there.
I think that's the key is subtle for a lot of guys, subtle focal point change. Like I think as an example, like elevated 4-seam 2 strikes, like we're trying to get just above the zone, but guys will totally change their focal point from down here to like up here, and now they spray it way up out of the zone. Like for a lot of my guys, like especially the guys with carry 4 seams, like they change the focal point from here to here.
Yep.
That ball ends up here because their miss location is going to naturally be a little bit higher than where their focal point is. But you make a foot plus adjustment to your focal point, now it's way up here, and so it can really be a little bit more subtle than a lot of guys give it credit for.
It works until, like you said, you try to make that change
right.
or that adjustment in your pin. So if you're in game and you're thinking, all right, now is the time for me to try this new focal point or to try to get this breaking ball down, well, you haven't even tried to see if that adjustment worked, and now you can't go through that list of things that actually do work because you have no idea. So that commitment's not going to be there.
Another example I can give is like for me, a 4-seam fastball, if I'm trying to throw one at the top of the zone to get somebody to swing under it, I've thrown enough of those pitches in my life that I know if I just aim right down the middle and throw it as hard as I possibly can, it's going to be up here. So like that's kind of my cue on that pitch is literally try to throw it right down the middle, but make sure you try to throw it super hard because my arm's going to be just a little bit late and it's going to be up.
Yep. The one thing I'll add from my own personal experience is like, again, not as a super high feel guy, never got to the level of kind of mastery of pinpoint location that you did. But for me, the focus was kind of blowing it down the middle of the catcher. And so if the catcher is now set up on the outside, on the inside, the focus is still on blowing it down the center of the catcher. It was always hard for me to like aim for the catcher's right knee or aim for his like left shoulder. But if I just kept it like center of the catcher, I had so much more room to work with and so much more margin for error to at least be in the zone. But again, if he was set up over here, it's still center of the catcher. Set up over here, center of the catcher. And so that was kind of how I made those minor adjustments to kind of my direction and everything. Like, I'm just trying to blow up the center. I'm not really trying to like place the ball in these super fine zones. And again, I know guys that works for the fine focus. I just never got to that point. And so at least being able to be competitive and consistently get in the zone, now you have a lot more margin for error. If this is our focal point, we know we're going to miss by 12 to 18 inches. Okay, now I'm at least competitive location. I'm around the zone with my stuff. And then from there, kind of can progress. Okay, let's go final question here, which is, should you think about lowering your intensity if you're trying to throw more strikes? If we're in a game where having issues, where we've like walked 2 batters in a row, like the common conventional wisdom is like, just take some off it, Johnny. Like throw it a little bit slower, Johnny. Like, have you guys seen that to actually help? And if not, why? If yes, why? Like what's the alternative to like taking some off the pitch if your command starts to falter in game?
Obviously, I hate the idea of like taking something off the pitch to get it in the zone. I haven't seen it work with very many guys at all. For me, it's more like timing adjustments and timing adjustments within your own delivery. Like, should you just get down the mound quicker? A lot of guys, like, you know, maybe their leg lift is messing them up, and it's literally just like simplify the delivery. Kick a little bit lower, that'll change the timing. Try maybe just a slide step, that'll really simplify the timing. And then once you throw a pitch with some good timing, you'll realize, oh, I can still, you know, rip it, and it'll be somewhere within the realm that I wanted it to go.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen taking some off the pitch work for higher level guys, but it's almost like I don't think they're focusing on lowering the effort level. I think they're just focused on, can I bring my aggression down just a little bit? And you see the velocity not really, drop that significantly. It just almost looks a little bit smoother. So it might improve the timing as an effect of that. So I think that kind of goes into that, what you said there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, there's a lot we didn't get to. I want to mention, eyesight, the vision, and the next time I want to go through all these different biomechanical, anatomical contributions. So there's a lot we didn't get to. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive into a lot more of this stuff. We could go for hours on this stuff, but super great to talk to you guys. What would you guys leave the viewers with for, again, if they're struggling and they're like, hey, I need help, I need guidance, like, what would you recommend they kind of do from here?
Yeah, get super specific about your training. If you're going to train command, pick very specific spots, throw to it a lot, and figure out things that work for you, whether it's mechanical, mental, speed, whatever it is. Just try different things, throw a whole bunch of stuff at the wall, see what sticks, come away with some cues that'll work for you in a game.
Just actually placing true focus and intent on command. You'll start to learn, study the mental game, study what's actually working, like even just making it a priority is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's very broad, of course, but just practice it and be intentional about it and find things that work, take them with you into the game.
Yeah, if you're not willing to experiment, you're not going to find something that works. And then on top of that, like we've already mentioned, challenge the system a little bit. Make sure that you're not always comfortable every time you go out there to throw.
Awesome. Yeah, we have plenty of videos out there, bullpen levels, different mental training techniques. We have a mental training course guys can check out as well if they're interested. But yeah, stay tuned for part 2. And thanks a lot, guys.